What's up, friends? Today we're making food webs. So, bottom level, producers, first trophic level. Second level, herbivores or primary consumers. Third level, secondary consumers. Fourth level, tertiary consumers. Fifth level, quaternary consumers. Okay? So, we've got some organisms over here. If you want to take these organisms and pause the video for a second, everybody in here has already made a food web from these organisms. We've got a hawk, a rabbit, a squirrel, a coyote, a grass, deer, snake, acorns, lizard, and grasshopper. So we're taking these organisms and we're using it to make a food web with. Okay? Food web, what's the purpose of them, Sarah? Matthew. To show the feeding relationship, to show the transfer of energy between organisms in an ecosystem. Good. So on the first level, Walker, of those organisms, which one goes on first level?
Grass and acorns.
Okay, so we got grass and acorns. Now acorns, if you don't know, come from oak trees. Good. Second level, what do we got, Katie?
Grasshoppers, squirrels, and rabbits.
Grasshopper, squirrels,
And deer.
rabbits, deer. All of these are herbivores. They only eat producers. Okay? Is everybody good with that? Now, what goes on our third trophic level or secondary consumers? Mariah? Lizard. Probably all we got here. Now, I will say this. The third and fourth level are usually the trickiest of the bunch because some things you could probably interpret may go on one or the other. Okay? That's usually the one I count off the least on because of that. Typically, producers are easy. Herbivores are easy because they only eat the producers. Top level consumers are easy because they're apex predators that things are not normally going to eat them. So in the organisms I gave you, what are things that are at the top of the food chain that are normally not going to be eaten by the things? Hawks and yes. Now, does that mean a coyote couldn't catch a hawk if it caught it somewhere down on the ground? Yeah, it could. But that's not part of its normal meal or diet. Hawks are top predators. They're eating lots of things that are smaller than them that they're able to catch from the air. So those are your two top level predators. And so the only thing that would go on our tertiary level here would be what? Snakes. Okay? That's all of them, right? Now, here's the next thing you need to do. You need to, as Matthew just said, show the flow of energy between these organisms. And we do that by drawing arrows. Good. So arrows represent the flow of energy. Arrows always point to where the energy is going. Good. So it should be going up. Now, unless you've got a Venus flytrap and your thing may look your food web may look a little strange. Okay. Now, I don't think I've ever seen them make someone draw a food web on the AP exam, but it's important you know how they're put together and so that you can interpret them. There are plenty of, especially on your test this week, there are plenty of food webs that you have to go through and interpret, and they're usually not nice and neat and in these lines. It's just kind of like a random ecosystem with a bunch of stuff drawn on there, and then there's arrows showing what it's what, and you have to kind of go through and count. Like they may ask you, the seagull in this ecosystem is a what consumer, or feeds at what level, and you have to go through and figure out where it feeds. So there's a lot of interpretation that you're going to have to do from the food webs that you have. Okay, so for us, what eats grass?
Deer.
Okay, deer eat grass. What else? Rabbits. What else? Grasshoppers. I don't know how much squirrels eat, but definitely those three. What eats acorns? Squirrels. I don't know about rabbits. I know deer eat acorns, and those for sure. Maybe rabbits do somewhat. We'll do the ones we know for sure, okay? So in a food web, you're drawing all of the possible feeding relationships between the different organisms, okay? What eats what? Where's the energy going? What eats the grasshopper, Mason?
Lizard.
Okay. What else? Yeah, I would think, yeah. So there's a lot of different types of snakes, but most snakes around here, especially like medium, smaller size snakes, will eat different insects and bugs that they can catch. So, yeah, they can definitely conceivably eat a grasshopper. Just because you're on one level doesn't mean something can't eat you from way higher up on the other level. Okay, you can have things on the top level, eat things on the bottom level. Okay, just like if we had like blackberries on here, we could put blackberries at the bottom, and coyotes would for sure eat that because they eat a lot of berries and they're omnivores. Or like bears are omnivores and eat a lot of stuff at the producer level. All right, squirrels. What eats those?
Hawks.
Hawks. What else?
Coyotes.
Coyotes. What else? Snakes. What eats rabbits? Snakes. Coyotes. Hawks. What eats deer?
Just coyotes.
Coyotes. What eats lizards?
Snakes.
Snakes primarily. All right, so now what we have is a bunch of arrows. Arrows, remember, are always pointing toward where the energy is going. The point of the arrow is to show how energy moves through an ecosystem, and it's always going to point to a lizard is getting eaten by the snake, so the energy is going toward the snake. Okay, so that's why we construct food webs, and that's how you need to interpret them. What is eating what is eating what. Now let's look at our ecosystem ecology notes, part 2, and today we're going to talk about nutrient cycles. So I'm going to kind of skip through these nutrient cycles. Some of y'all have seen this in AP Environmental. Some of y'all, you should have seen this in 9th grade. But you can see our notes are very long and drawn out and written out. And I'm going to give you kind of an abridged version, but they're important points that you need to know about the different cycles as it relates to biology. So, water cycle. Why do we need water? Okay, transfer of nutrients and waste throughout our body, transportation system. What else? Yeah, so thermoregulation. So water helps to regulate the temperature in our bodies. So those are two important tasks of water. Now, the same thing like in plants. Plants need water for photosynthesis, one, and the other one, probably the second most important, would be. I don't know about how much about temperature. Maybe somewhat temperature, but usually I don't know if that's as big a concern. That may be in leaves. But definitely for transport. You have to transport. Does anybody remember the two transport areas in a plant, or were the two transport tissues? Y'all were supposed to draw it out on your cross section of a stem. Xylem and phloem. Xylem, what does it carry? Xylem carries water. Remember, it's X. X is close to W, right? Somewhere in there. And that's the only way I can remember it. So xylem's close to W. X is close to W for xylem. And xylem carries, Z, sorry. It's close to, so what does it carry? It carries water, and it carries it from where does water go in plants? Roots to the
Leaves.
shoot, yeah, to the leaves, the shoots, the different parts of the plant. So, and then the phloem carries what?
Nutrients.
Yes, it carries nutrients from where to where? Yeah, sorry. Xylem is XYLEM. Phloem is PHLLOEM. Phloem. It carries, so the easy way to remember phloem is it's the products of photosynthesis. It's carrying sugars from where to where? Where are sugars produced in a plant primarily? The leaves through photosynthesis. Good, Mason. And where do they go to? The rest of the plant, through like the trunk and to the roots. Good. Where they're oftentimes stored. So xylem's carrying stuff up, water up, and then primarily, so there's some minerals and nutrients, and the phloem's carrying the products of photosynthesis to the stem and down to the roots. Okay, everybody good with that? Now, I would say probably y'all are familiar with, I'm not going to go through these, evaporation, condensation, precipitation. Those are all terms you should know. If you don't, you need to go back and review them. One I'm going to talk about is evapotranspiration, which means the evaporation of water from the leaves of a plant through, which we would call just transpiration most of the time. So, like in the rainforest, evapotranspiration is super important. Why? In a rainforest, evapotranspiration accounts for about 50% of the rainfall. So that means the rain that's coming down in a rainforest, about half of that came from the plants. So the plants open up their stomata, water comes out, CO2 comes in, and that goes up. It gets hot during the day, it condenses, it falls back as rain. Now, the other half comes from, where does most of our rain come from? Oceans, good. Yes, ocean water. Now, that means, so half of that rain is going to come down roughly, and so some of it's going to be absorbed back by the plants, but a lot of it's also going to go where?
Into the soil.
Some of it in the soil, some of it's going to run off, a lot of it's going to go into rivers and streams, back to the ocean. So you're just cycling back and forth that water between the plants, the air, and the ocean. All right, next cycle, the carbon cycle. Why is carbon important for us? Carbon dioxide is needed for photosynthesis. What else? Why is it important for us in particular?
That's what we produce. Well, we're also made of.
Yes. So carbon forms the framework for all living things. So there are four main organic molecules that we've studied. Carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. All of those, the basis for each one of those organic molecules is carbon. So it forms the framework and the structure. I want to say it's roughly 30% if you just look at the amount of elements that make up the human body and you take out water. So like of the dry mass, I think it's around 30% is carbon. So it's a huge portion is from the carbon molecules that are making up our body, okay? Now, carbon dioxide, we breathe it out through respiration. Plants take it in during photosynthesis. A lot of it's stored in the earth and different fossil fuels. But those are the important reasons that we need carbon. Next one, phosphorus. Phosphorus is important to us. I'm going to come back to nitrogen. Phosphorus is important to us in particular for what reasons?
ATP.
So we need it for ATP. You got 3 phosphates. What else?
DNA.
DNA. Phosphate makes up the backbone of DNA. Phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar. What else?
Phospholipid bilayer.
So in every cell in your body and every membrane of every organelle is made up of a phospholipid bilayer. That means it's a lot of phosphate. Now, phosphate is typically the limiting nutrient in most ecosystems. Why? Limiting nutrient means it limits the productivity of that ecosystem. It's like if you're baking cakes, phosphate's like the sugar. If you don't have the sugar, you're not making the cake. So if you don't have the phosphate, you're not making the organisms. Why does it limit so much the productivity? What's the difference between it and these other nutrients?
There's less phosphorus.
What?
There's like less phosphorus to go around.
Why?
No way to make it.
I would say, let's say it's, okay, I'll give you a hint, it's slower. It moves much more slowly than the others. Why?
Because it comes from rocks.
Where does it not come from?
The air.
The air. So think about traveling. Have you ever flown somewhere? Yes. If you get, well, most of y'all. If you fly somewhere, you get there a lot quicker. You're traveling fast. Okay? You're going through the air. Same thing with nutrients. If they're moving through the air, you can move around and circulate a lot more quickly than if you are just by land or dissolved in the water. So everything else, the nutrients are moving much more quickly than with the phosphorus cycle. And also, there's a lot of phosphorus that is non-soluble, so a lot of times it's not in a form that plants can use and consume and then pass on to us. So you need to know the reasons why phosphorus is important. You need to know that it moves slowly and why it moves slowly. It's a limiting nutrient. We said when you have an excess amount of fertilizer or nutrients that go into a lake or pond, it could cause what? Eutrophication, that overgrowth of algae. It's like that one ingredient that's needed for that massive overgrowth. So super important for those reasons. Last thing, nitrogen cycle. And probably the most important, I know they ask more questions about this on apes than they do any other cycle. Nitrogen cycle. So things you need to be familiar with. One, why is it important? Sarah? Why do you need nitrogen? Matthew?
It's what we mainly breed, isn't it?
Well, it makes up what percent of the atmosphere? 78, or a little bit over 78. But no, that's not right. That's not why we need it. Nitrogen in the air is N2. It is an inert gas that is unreactive. Why do we need nitrogen? In particular?
Well, as ammonia, what would be?
Well, that's why we need to get rid of nitrogen. That's not why we need it.
Does it create the atmosphere?
Oh my God. I don't care about the atmosphere. I don't care about N2 in the atmosphere. Why do you need it in your body? There are two very specific places that you need it and use this a lot.
Nucleotides,
Nucleotides, what part of the nucleotide?
like the base,
What do we call those bases?
nitrogen.
Nitrogen bases, good. A, T, C, G, U's. Those are made of, yes, one of the main components is nitrogen, good. And then the other reason or place where we find nitrogen in the body is? Makes up like half of your body biomass, excluding the water. There's no nitrogen in water, Matthew. No, it's H2O. Amino acids and proteins. So amino acids, if you remember the structure, there's an N2 on one end, and then you have the R group that's specialized, and then a hydroxyl group, and then I think another H at the bottom. So in order to make amino acids and proteins, which makes up like half of your dry mass, you have to have nitrogen. So like plants that are producers, that's another key component of their growth is nitrogen because it makes up a huge portion of, their DNA or RNA, all their nucleotides, and then also is needed for protein production. And like Walker said, we need nitrogen for those purposes, but we also have to get rid of it or what?
Will build up. And
Yeah, it's toxic and we'll die. So we normally get rid of it through our
urinary tract.
kidneys, good. So in our urine, we get rid of nitrogen. Mammals do through what form? In the form of urea. So the ammonia is converted into urea. There's a formula, I don't know, whatever. And then it mixes with water and we call it urine. Good. Fish get rid of ammonia directly into the water. And then birds and reptiles get rid of ammonia in the form of uric acid, that white pasty stuff on the crap on the top of your car. Good. So that's gotten to be, you have to get rid of that. That's a byproduct of cell respiration breaking down proteins. So nitrogen, if we can't use N2 out of the air to produce those things, plants can't use N2 out of the air. How do they get the N2 out of the air? Your notes say something about removed from the air by water. Yes, some of that may get dissolved and be in the soil. But in order for plants to take it up, it has to be converted into one of two forms. What is it? Ammonium or nitrate. Good. Now, an easy way for me to remember this is one, I used to help my dad on the farm a lot, and we would go buy ammonium nitrate. So ammonium and nitrate are the two forms of nitrogen that plants can absorb and use. So bacteria are usually involved in that nitrification process or conversion to nitrate, basically taking it and converting it. And this is actually going to be a subject of our data nugget, some analysis that we do later. And then also, when things die, they break down. And on the side of the road in the summertime, they get what? Like some of you at the gym. They get swole. Stinky was not what I was thinking of, Miranda, but that's a different direction. Yeah, so they do get swollen. I remember one time there was a dead cow on the side of the road. That joker, I've never seen anything so big. Looked like it could float away. It was so bloated. But, and I'll tell you about the exploding kitten in a second. There's a game called Exploding Kittens, but that's a different story. So nitrogen, as your bodies break down, that denitrifying process it happens through bacteria. Ammonia gas is given off, and that's what causes that swelling and expanse. So we had hogs when I was little, and my dad went and got some corn. He would fill up his entire truck bed with corn, and then he'd pull it over to the barn and we'd shovel it into these barrels at our barn to feed the hogs and cows. And so I usually got to do most of the shoveling. But anyway, I was probably 10 or 12. Maybe it wasn't even that old. I remember I was pretty jaded by this whole experience. So I opened the gate up. My dad drives through this gate, and I look down, and it's summertime, and the grass is kind of grown up. But in the pathway, there's a dead kitten. And the kitten, it's the summertime, so it had swollen up. Like, I could tell it was really dead and swollen. And so I'm yelling like, "Stop, Dad, stop." And he didn't hear me, and he keeps rolling backwards. And he rolls over the kitten with the truck, and it's full of corn on the back, so it's super heavy load. As soon as he rolls over it, this thing's swollen up. It just goes boom. It sounds like a giant explosion. And when he rolls the tire, when it comes back over the other side, the kitten's gone. It exploded in, I don't know, a million pieces or something, or maybe it was stuck to the tire and I just didn't notice it. But anyway, there's a little kitty cat all over the place. Any questions about the nitrogen cycle? Alrighty then, so those are important processes. There's one other word in there you may need to know. It's called assimilation. Assimilation, we hear that term in politics a lot where people assimilate into cultures. Assimilate for nutrients means you're incorporating them into something, so incorporating nitrogen into the organism. So, and the same would apply for the other nutrients. Yes, we hear you, Mr. Rooster. Temperature cycling. Temperature has what effect on cycling? The higher the temperature, the faster it cycles. Good. So typically that's why you see more nutrients, more growth cycled and move, and more growth in areas like in the tropics or where we live in the summertime, just because molecules move faster, they get around, and they help stuff grow faster. Take care.